All right, welcome everyone joining us. This is Chris Posey with the Atlanta Urban Debate League. I'm going to jump right in and get started. We're going to be discussing effective strategies for getting organized when debating and before debating on the affirmative side. A similar presentation regarding organization on the negative and other topics will be available on our website at atlantadebate.org and soon via our Atlanta Debate YouTube channel. First, we'll talk a little bit about some specific strategies, but before we do that, I would like to talk a little bit briefly about why organization can be important in debate. If you have competed at a debate tournament and even just had a practice debate round, you know that in-round preparation time is precious and valuable. A misplaced piece of evidence can quickly eliminate your capacity to generate effective defenses and responses before your speech, as you're wasting time looking for evidence instead of thinking about arguments. In addition to preparation time in the round, getting organized on the affirmative enables you to plan and prepare before the tournament even starts. So, on your own or with coaches, for most of the arguments you'll ever hear inside of a debate round, you can talk about them outside of the debate round and think about them as well. This extra time to research, think about, and discuss arguments with your coaches and team can really provide the boost that is needed to win arguments in a round and ultimately win the round itself. Not to be discounted either is the helpful or damaging effect organization can have on your credibility in the round. Organization creates confidence and minimizes visual distractions for the judge or the evaluator, and disorganization has the opposite effect, and it can, of course, impact your ability to focus mentally, which is always necessary in debate rounds. Now we're going to discuss a little bit more detail about 5 specific ways that you can get organized on the affirmative. We, of course, hope to create additional content on this subject in the future, but I'm confident that the topics we'll discuss will help many teams be a little bit more successful. For more content and to request specific help or content, please visit us on our website at atlantadebate.org. Here in 2016, there are a lot of tools available to debaters looking to use technology to get and stay organized. It's likely that the amount of these tools is only going to grow and their capabilities are only going to get better. We're not going to talk too much today about debating specifically with computers, tablets, or other devices, but a lot of the same principles that we discussed today will apply, just have to apply them in a digital context. We do have several great resources available on our website at atlantadebate.org regarding debating paperless and hope to add more soon as well. Accordion files have been a favorite tool of debaters for many years. If you can get your hands on 1 or 2 or even 3, you will find them very useful for staying organized in debate rounds. These expanding folders allow you to quickly find and retrieve evidence during rounds, and not to be discounted as well, but you can also find these items very quietly as opposed to the disruption that flipping through boxes and file folders can have for anyone who's evaluating the round or your partner who may be speaking during that time. Sharpies and highlighters are things that you want to have with you to stay organized in the round as well. Once you become more organized with your arguments, specifically the ones that you hear often, you're going to have more time during the debate and during prep time to reread and highlight evidence for arguments that you are less familiar with and prepared for. So having these tools available to either edit indexes on your file folders or accordions, or highlight evidence either to change the highlighting that's already there or evidence that you haven't needed to read before, having these tools available is important. You also might want to consider using different colored paper for different items in the debate round, like your 1AC, your flow sheets, or even 2AC blocks. With the amount of paper moving around on your desk and around multiple desks throughout a debate, it can be really helpful to be able to identify by color and quickly retrieve vital in-round pieces like the ones mentioned above. If you need your flow, it's great to be able to identify it quickly. Scissors and tape are less necessary in the round, but they are really helpful to customize the organization of your packet and your accordions or binders if you choose to use them. Cutting and taping piece of evidence to paper allows you to, maybe if a piece of the packet has two pieces of evidence on it, you can cut out one piece of evidence and then paste it with other analytical arguments or other pieces of evidence that you prefer to read on a particular topic. And so the evidence packet limits the evidence that you can read, but we don't limit the order in which you read it or how you explain it or other analytical arguments that you might develop to complement the evidence that we provide you. So feel free to cut it up and paste it on paper. And of course, the sky's the limit in terms of what you want to add in terms of arguments that you come up with on your own, and being able to cut and paste evidence with those arguments and put them in the same context can be really persuasive for a judge as well. Next, I want to talk about organization in particular for the 1AC. One thing that I mentioned to a lot of debaters is, if possible, have a couple copies of your 1AC. We try our best at tournaments to have some emergency evidence available, and the fact of the matter is we can't have backup evidence for everyone. And if you want to ensure that you have such an important part of your affirmative with you for every debate and you're not scrambling, then having a couple copies can be a really good idea. As talked a little bit about before, maybe you want to put your 1AC in a different color so that you can find the evidence quickly. That's up to you. Also to consider when organizing your 1AC that you might want to put together a few different versions ahead of time, or break them up into parts that can be assembled into customized versions right before they need to be read in a debate round. And what I mean by this is, particularly high school debaters and varsity debaters as well, you might have multiple advantages that you're reading for your affirmative, and you may have more advantages than you have time to read in the 1AC, and some of those advantages might work well against certain negative arguments and not as well against other negative arguments. And so picking and choosing your advantages can be a great way to strategize before a debate round, and breaking up the advantages into modules that maybe you just grab, the inherency and then the advantage modules that you want, and solvency or other preamps that you want before the debate, and you have it organized in either file folders or slots in your accordion that makes it easy to kind of see where each piece is and grab it. This is of course not necessary whatsoever, but the organization process only enables you to be able to do these types of things more and more, and gain more of a competitive edge over your opponents. Last variation just to mention is, while a lot of the judges in the debate community may be college debaters and familiar with and comfortable with fast or debate and speaking quickly, or spreading as it's known, a lot of times you're going to have very, very good judges that just aren't familiar with it or don't prefer when debaters speak as quickly as they can. And so having a couple different versions of the 1AC ready to go in time so that you know how long it takes you to either read it quickly or slowly, and be able to grab those 1ACs very quickly, depending on whether or not you realize at the last minute something about your judge that might necessitate a change. It's good to have those options available to you. Now we're going to talk quickly about the 2AC. In general, it's a good idea for debaters to avoid reading too many or too long of case extensions in the 2AC. The 1AC exists and is designed to provide the 2AC with what they need in terms of defending negative case arguments. Effective 2AC speeches must efficiently extend and summarize this 1AC evidence to reserve as much time as possible to answer off-case arguments and defend case arguments as well. Advantage overviews can be a great way for debaters to set themselves up for this success. You can work on a 30-second to a minute summary of your 1AC positions, where you mention each piece of evidence from the 1AC by name and what it says, and maybe even provide a little bit of impact calculus on how the impact of your advantage compares to other impacts in the debate or particular off-case or offensive arguments that the negative is making. don't hesitate to get opinions from fellow team members, coaches, or even me through email or places like the debate center or any of the resources that are available to you. One of the best parts about organization and preparing ahead of time is you not only have the access to what your brain can come up with, but you can augment your own skill with the skill and resources that are available to you. Beyond the 1AC, debaters are really responsible for many pages of additional evidence that back up their plan's advantages, solvency, and even the inherency. In general, priority in your indexes should be given to advantage and solvency extensions, as inherency is very rarely debated past the 1AC. So you may need to grab advantage overviews, answers to specific advantage or solvency arguments very quickly. And so if you're using an accordion, you want to feature those on the index, and maybe even separate and not combine different arguments in the same slot if they are ones that you need to grab often and quickly. As long as the evidence is clearly labeled at the top, you can feel free to combine different topics of evidence into one pocket. If you're progressing in your ability to organize and prepare, the number of times that you're going to need to find evidence beyond the 1AC and your 2AC blocks will really approach zero in most debates, because there's not going to be many things that you haven't thought of to prepare a block to. And as the semesters go by, you should have had plenty of time to make some of those preparations. Next, I'd like to talk about case blocks, or answering specific negative case arguments in the 2AC. Case blocks are a great way to stay organized and effectively answer negative attacks on your case. The goal of writing a case block is to pre-select and prepare 3 to 5 arguments in response to predictable negative arguments. You can consult your memory, team, flows, etc. to quickly generate a list of negative case arguments that you have needed to answer. You want to prioritize this list and begin selecting your 3 to 5 arguments to answer each of these arguments on the list. Don't forget to include your teammates, coaches, and again, people like the coaches at the debate center. Their feedback can help take your responses to that next level. You really want to try and keep it short and sweet for your case blocks. Most negative case arguments are defensive in nature, and most negative teams are going to prioritize discussion of their own off-case arguments. Regardless, you want to minimize the amount of airtime you give your opponent's attacks, and if anything, spend more time explaining your advantages. If you've prepared 3 to 5 responses, the first couple of arguments should be simple extensions and explanations of how your 1AC evidence answers or proves their argument irrelevant. Arguments 3 through 5 on your case block can include additional evidentiary support, but these responses should be reserved for the rare instances where they're necessary. Maybe the team doesn't make very many arguments, and so you feel like you're going to have extra time and want to put extra coverage on some arguments, or in particular, that this team really likes to talk about that argument in the 2NR. Those are reasons to read, more than just using your case 1AC evidence, to answer these arguments, and would necessitate maybe reading some more evidence and more arguments. If you do find yourself reading evidence quite often on a particular argument in the 2AC or even worse in the 1AR, then consider adding more evidence on that subject or on that argument to the 1AC and taking out non-necessary pieces or pieces of evidence that you don't end up using as much. Of course, if you're not familiar with adding or removing things to the 1AC, it's always easier to add things, especially if you have time to read. But please feel free to check with other more experienced team members or coaches about this. You don't want to take out the wrong part of the 1AC and be in trouble because you have an incomplete position presented to the judge at the end of the first speech. One way to approach 2AC blocks, beyond your initial list of arguments that you and hopefully your teammates and coaches have come up with, is to have a mentality that you want to try to never face an argument that you're unprepared for twice. Of course, you want to try and never lose to an argument twice as well, but sometimes you're unprepared and you win, and sometimes you're prepared and you still lose. But and you're always, of course, going to face new arguments that you've never heard before. But once you do hear a new argument, having an effective system for recording that argument and developing responses before, even the next round or, an upcoming tournament following the one that you're currently at. Last, just to mention for case blocks, you may want to take some time, especially more experienced debaters looking to add an extra edge. You may want to take some time to consider the needs of your 1AR. If they are going to need to read evidence on an argument, you can decide which one that should be. Typically you want to pick one that's short and very concise about the claim and the warrant of the argument. Making those decisions ahead of time can help with, argument choice because you have more time to think about it, but also just saving the 1AR some prep time and stress trying to pick evidence when, they're at a point where they feel like they need to read more evidence on that question to win the debate. Next, let's talk about 2AC off-case blocks. When answering negative off-case arguments, and these are arguments like disadvantages, counterplans, and critiques, many of the same concepts for 2AC case block development are going to be talked about for off-case blocks. In general, you want to have 3 to 5 answers prepared in response, probably closer to 5 or maybe even 7 arguments for off-case arguments, especially if you're debating quickly or speaking quickly. You want them prepared in response to each off-case argument that you can predict that you'll face. And so for those of us with these packets, it's pretty easy to predict what you're going to face, and you really have no reason not to be able to put together at least some thoughts and arguments ahead of time to be used in the 2AC to answer these off-case arguments. You can also easily organize these blocks in an accordion file and sort them. Oftentimes you want to sort them by type, so you put all of your answers to disadvantages together, all of your answers to counterplans, and so forth. Critiques as another example. Extensions to the 2AC blocks can either be kept in like a secondary slot right behind the 2AC arguments that you've selected, or you can reserve those in file folders, because as I mentioned, if you remember when discussing before, that as you continue to get better organized and more prepared, you will need reserve evidence less and less because you'll have already pulled out the arguments and incorporated them into blocks. Worth mentioning is, of course, the overall strategy to answering off-case arguments on the affirmative. Specifics regarding answering disadvantages, counterplans, critiques, and even particular off-case arguments for the topic or the current topic are going to be made available and are currently available on our website at atlantadebate.org. But in general, each of these different type of off-case arguments will be answered with the same template of arguments. And what I mean by that is you'll answer disadvantages generally the same way, you'll answer counterplans generally the same way, critiques generally the same way, even some similarities between critiques and counterplans. For example, an effective 2AC against a disadvantage would often include 1 to 2 uniqueness answers, 1 to 2 no link arguments, maybe 1 to 2 link turn arguments, or some sort of impact defense, of course, never both. And, almost always you want to talk a little bit about why your case outweighs. Start that discussion in the 2AC and in specific context of that off-case position. As you write more and more 2AC blocks, you're going to be able to learn and customize your own approach to the negative positions. As mentioned above, it can also be a good idea to have 1 to 2 arguments for each type of response. Some debates you may prefer to read 2 uniqueness cards versus 1. 2AC blocks can and need to be flexible to in-round variables. These variables can include a number of off-case positions that have been read, the length and depth of off-case arguments, and the judge preferences, and many other constraints can dictate this. As mentioned, when discussing 2AC case blocks, a great frame of mind on the affirmative is preparing to avoid being unprepared to face any argument more than once. If you hear an argument, do not have a response prepared, make note of it, and develop a system to generate answers either by yourself, your partner, or with coaches before even your next debate, because you could hear that argument again, or certainly before the next tournament. Even more so than with case blocks, it can be really helpful to consider the needs of the 1AR when it comes to evidence and blocks. it can be a good idea to at least think about how the 1AR will explain arguments that you selected for your blocks, and then also pre-select extension evidence if they feel the need. For some of the more experienced debaters, you may have either yourself or come up across teams that may like to read new link arguments or new impact arguments in the negative block, and having a prepared response to those specific arguments for the 1AR when time and word economy and choice of arguments is really, really important due to the amount of time that they have to respond to and versus the amount of time they have. So that type of organization and preparation can be really helpful to affirmative teams as well. After instituting an organization and block creation system, you're still going to need extensions beyond your blocks sometimes, and that will gradually decrease, but you will still occasionally need to grab those things. Most of your preferred evidence choices are going to make their way into your 2AC blocks or even the 1AC. The infrequently used stack of evidence, to keep this extension evidence, you can keep it in a secondary accordion slot, close to the blocks for that argument, especially early on in your process. If you're grabbing these arguments more often, then having them can be, it can be helpful to have them right behind. But you can also keep them in a file folder, off to the side and easily grab it if you need to grab something additional beyond the ones that you've selected for your 2AC blocks. As you move and remove, cut, paste, and tape evidence from the packet into blocks, the original index can feel, rather irrelevant, but I would still hold on to it. Maybe stick all of them in a slot in one of your accordions or keep a file folder of indexes just in case you need them. Bits and pieces of the index can even be cut and pasted onto the front of your accordion or the front of a file folder to help you index effectively. As mentioned when discussing blocks, don't forget to consider the ability for the 1AR to access these extensions if necessary. Typically, they have even less preparation time available to them, and their use directly impacts the time that you'll have available to you in your 2AR. Thank you so much for joining us, and best of luck to you at your next event. As always, don't hesitate to reach out to me directly or any of us at the Atlanta Urban Debate League. We're eager and always available to help. You can reach me directly by email at chris@atlantadebate.org or see more resources right away at our YouTube channel at Atlanta Debate. Thanks, and look forward to hearing from you and seeing you at tournaments.